Welcome to Legal Beagle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Legal Beagle with Kristina Lyke. Kristina is the owner of Lyke Law PLLC. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today we're talking about revocation of paternity in Michigan. Most people assume that once legal fatherhood is established, it can never be challenged, but in some situations, questions about paternity can come up years later, affecting parental rights, custody, child support, and of course, the entire family. And we're going to get into it. Kristina, good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean, and thank you for having us again.
Let's start with the basics. We're in Michigan. What is revocation of paternity?
Well, first of all, it's a legal process to revoke the paternity. Well, what does that all mean, right? So you have an affidavit of parentage, and when a child is born, you go to the hospital, right? Most people do, and they sign a birth certificate, which gives the name of the legal father, the name of the legal mother. But also you sign what is called an affidavit of parentage form. And what that affidavit of parentage form is that it acknowledges who the legal father is, right? So a lot of times people will sign that form, and then years later we find out it was a different father that should have been placed on that form. Or we have a situation where there's a divorce going on, and someone may have gotten pregnant during that time period of the divorce. And we used to have what is called a Serifin hearing, but this Revocation of Paternity Act actually took over that Serifin hearing. So now it's a little bit different. And today we'll learn a little bit more of what those procedures are.
Okay. All right. That's an interesting scenario. Yeah, that during a divorce and suddenly there is kind of a different father in the scene. When can someone ask a court to revoke paternity, if that's the right term, I guess? Yeah.
I think what you're looking for is in the statute, it actually talks about you have 3 years from the date that the child is born to actually revoke a paternity. So, for instance, you actually have to go and, well, first of all, you have to find out sometimes if the child is actually yours, right? So how do we do that?
Yeah.
So sometimes people will come and file a complaint to revoke paternity to try to establish whether or not they do have paternity of the child and whether or not they are the biological father. So that's basically the 3-year time period.
And is that it? I mean, in terms of time limits, that's like it.
There is a different way, but that is a different, I will say that's going to be a longer episode, probably most likely. So I will say this, let's stick with what the statute says. It says 3 years right now. And we'll go with that right now.
Can someone be listed as the legal father, even if DNA later shows they're not the biological father?
Yes. So that's what we were talking about at the very beginning of this episode. So people can actually be
right.
listed as a father, and they're really not the father. And a lot of times women do this because of the fact is that maybe there's an abuser on the other side, or there's domestic violence, or they just don't like that individual, and they thought that this would be a better father. Some people try to do that. Some people try to take out the biological father just because of the fact is they know that that's going to hurt that individual. So there is ways of doing that. However, what you want to do is the process is you want to do a complaint for what is called complaint for a revocation of paternity. And the individual, first of all, we have to go and see whether or not the child is actually the DNA. We have to get a test taken to see whether or not biologically the child is yours or not. So, and once we get that order, then we can go into parenting time. But we first of all have to get that order of paternity first, foremost.
Parenting time. I'm thinking about what about child support? What happens to child support if paternity is revoked?
So that's a good question. So let's say that we have a legal father, and for instance, you're the legal father. You and I were married, and unfortunately, there was a child involved. I mean, fortunately, there's a child involved, but the circumstances, of course. But if that happened, what you could do is you're paying child support right now. So that's not fair to you as being the presumed father, because you are the presumed father if you are married to an individual that is
Ah,
having a child, right? So that's the reason
mhm,
why, and it's always been that way. So because you're the presumed father, you're going to pay child support on that child, whether or not it's yours or not, because you are the presumed father, which
mhm.
leads us most likely to your next question, possibly, or maybe a question later on, but talking about presumed fathers and how they can revoke paternity, because that's a situation in and of itself. Because many people can revoke paternity. The mother can, the father can, the presumed father can, which we call the legal father, and then we also call the biological father too as well.
What happens to parenting time or, custody and parenting time? They're separate. If paternity is revoked, what then happens?
So if you, like, for instance, as an individual becomes the legal father, so the biological father, we get a revocation order that says you are the father of this child. So that means the court can actually go and grant custody of that to that person, and also can grant parenting time. However, we still have to go through what is called the best interest factors, and those factors establish who has the established custodial environment, and also what if any parenting time should be awarded. And each person should
Hmm.
be awarded parenting time unless there's clear and convincing evidence to prove otherwise.
You mentioned the term there, established custodial time. I'm thinking in my head, I was like, oh, that must refer to the child. There's already a lifestyle, like there's already a situation that's been established that the court is going to look at. Is that
That's a great question. It's what is called an established custodial environment. And for short terms, we call it, for the abbreviation, we call it ECE. And what that means is, who does a child look to for love, affection, guidance, and discipline, right? And so if the child has been with an individual for a long time, they usually depend on that mother or father for the love, what they need, like if they're have a trauma in their life, or if they need a band-aid, their affection, their guidance. Who does a child look to for what church they attend, or where, for discipline purposes? Who does a child go to for a triumph? So those things we look to for as the ECE. So basically, whoever has the ECE, now we have to go, we decide who has the established custodial environment. Now we have to look to what kind of parenting time, if any, should be established.
I'm wondering about, I mean, some of this seems kind of complicated. How important is it to, or when in the process, when do you speak to an attorney? Do I have to speak to an attorney before I file a revocation of paternity case? Can you do it on your own? Or is it just like you could, but I don't advise it because of certain pitfalls you need to avoid? What's your experience there?
That is a wonderful question. Now, I've been practicing for over 20 years, and this statute came into effect because I used to know what was called the Serifin hearing. And I
Right.
just want to go back to that for a little bit, because when people were married, when we were going through a divorce, and we had an episode of a child being born basically out of wedlock, but during the marriage, right, by another individual, what do we do on that situation? What we used to do is I would have the father come in and testify, which means the biological father, and testify of the date of conception, that they know that this child is theirs because and we go through all these different factors. And then I
Hmm.
ask the other father, the presumed father, which she's still continuing to be married to, I
Yeah. The
ask that.
soon to be divorced
Right. The divorced father will say in this
husband. Yeah.
situation. We call him the
Yeah.
presumed father, though, but what we usually
Okay.
ask them is that, when was the last time that you had intercourse with this lady? When was do you believe that this child is yours? Do you know this individual? Did you know that they were having an affair? Things of that nature. But basically what we were doing is proving that that child did not belong to that individual. Um, so that was
Hmm.
basically the Seraphin hearing. And I usually produce like an affidavit, first of all, to the court from the presumed father, the biological father, excuse me. And I would have him actually come subpoenaed to the court to make sure that he was going to be there to testify. And then I would go through those questions with him prior to the evidentiary hearing. Now,
Hmm.
things have changed because now we do what is called the Revocation Act, and we call it ROPA for
Hmm.
short. And
Okay.
there's a lot of issues to this because one, let's say we have that situation. They're getting divorced. And let's say the individual is not known at that time period and they're not part of the divorce. What do they do? So the biological father would have to actually do what is called a motion to intervene into the divorce proceedings. And this is very unique because a lot of attorneys and a lot of judges are not used to a motion to intervene. So I had to
Right.
teach myself how to do one of these, and I did this a long time ago, and I've actually taught other people in the realm of custody and parenting time. But it's very fascinating because in the statute it states this: if the person had knowledge that they were married at the time of conception, they cannot have that revocation of paternity. And I had a case that I was laying down the facts and everything was going pretty well, and then all of a sudden, I did not know of this. There was a red herring out there, and there was text messages that said, "Please stop having sex with my wife." Right? So that was the red herring that he knew. He had knowledge that this person was actually married during the conception of this child. So that's one of
And
the factors that you have to know about. And
yeah,
so in order to have the revocation of paternity, I would suggest that, first of all, it's never good to cheat on your spouse, number 1. But number 2
sure.
is that the child, in my opinion, if this situation happens, I don't tolerate or condone that type of behavior. However, if it does happen, I believe that the child does have a right to know their legal father, their biological father. And so
Right.
that statute makes it a little bit difficult sometimes when they do have knowledge of that. So that can be an issue. But there
Mhm.
are other ways of doing it. And today's, we have a short time period, but there's other ways of actually having the acknowledgement of paternity. There's ways of doing it with the mother. So the mother could start the complaint herself. So the situation with a woman who is unmarried, which we call that the um, children that are born out of wedlock. So what we do is we need to do a revocation of paternity on that situation too. And sometimes this is where it gets a little tricky because sometimes the woman will place another person's name on the legal affidavit of parentage. And that affidavit of parentage is what people have to realize is if you intentionally do that on purpose and place someone else's name on there, that is a vital record. So it's a misdemeanor, which is a crime to do that. So a lot of times I always tell people when we're trying to get like a complaint for parenting time, specifically with individuals who are unmarried, we want to make sure that we have that affidavit of parentage before we start the process. Because if they don't have that affidavit of parentage, that can be an issue in itself because we might have to do a revocation of paternity instead of just having a complaint for custody. And so that really does matter. So it's going back to your original question, can people do this on their own? Sure, but you're most likely going to fail, number 1. And number 2 is you're going to probably ruin the process that you have a chance to get that paternity. And 3, you'll probably mess up on child support, custody, and parenting time as well. So it's very important that individuals come to a lawyer that has experience in revocation of paternity and also custody and parenting time as well. Because once you get that initial revocation of paternity order that says you are the father, right? That doesn't end there because now we have to go to the next step of what's going to be the custody and what's going to be the parenting time as well.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, this comes up all the time now in these conversations, given the, obviously the ubiquity of the web and search and now AI, and people have all these, have access to great information, but also not all the information. And especially when you're talking about, yeah, that's the way it used to be, but now it's this way. And, it's the kind of thing that is definitely something that trips people up. I'm hearing about a lot.
And there's a lot of judges out there that actually still do not know that, the Serifin hearing is not the way to do it. There's a lot of lawyers too out there. And as I always say is family law is ever changing, and it's not easy. Like I always tell people this, I would not go into your job because I would probably most likely ruin a machine or do something that was wrong, break my arm, break the pieces to the car, whatever, because everybody has their role in life. And I said, AI, we're finding out lawyers are getting sued because of the fact they're using AI. And it's not, first of all, you have a duty to your client to actually go look up this stuff and make sure that you're knowledgeable and that you're giving the right advice. But you're also getting advice from AI that is not. There was actually a case on point that this person actually turned in a brief. It was a lawyer that turned in a brief, and the judge found out it was the wrong case law that was used. And there was no such case law that was ever used.
It was total hallucination, right? It was like all made up or something.
It was made up. Yeah. And so, I mean, you can lose your license of that or get it suspended.
And should.
Well, right. Because, I mean, you should really take the time. And I mean, I know I can appreciate people like to have their spare time, but it's always about placing the clients first and making sure that you take care of them and make sure you know what you're doing to try to get the best result for them. Especially, this is your children. You want to make sure that your children are well taken care of.
Yeah, you don't want that stuff coming back to haunt them, having to undo that. Wow. Well, Kristina, thank you so much. We're up against time for this episode, but thanks for sharing your expertise. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Legal Beagle with Kristina Lyke. If you have questions of your own about paternity, custody, or other family law matters in Michigan, visit Kristina's website, LykeLaw.com. You can learn more and you can schedule a consultation there. If you enjoyed this episode, found it helpful, be sure to, leave us a thumbs up, maybe share a link with someone in your world who does have some custody issues they're dealing with. And you can also subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. Thanks very much. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.